Okay, hello everyone.
Hello.
How are y'all doing tonight?
Excellent.
Good, warm, I hope-ish, now that you're inside. Well, thank you all so much for coming out tonight, and welcome to our bookstore. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director here at Bookstore Magic. We are so excited to have Sara Levine and Molly McGhee with us tonight to celebrate the launch of Sara's newest novel, The Hitch, which follows Rose as she deals with a very unique crisis, her nephew being possessed by the soul of a dead corgi, slain at the dog park by Rose's dog, while his parents are in Mexico. As moving as it is absurd, there is so much to discuss in this wonderful book. But before we officially dive in, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's event is going to go. First, we will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk, Sara will be around to sign and personalize your books at the alcove next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And finally, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of The Hitch online using the link in the live stream description. Okay, now for me to introduce the two incredible writers we have here tonight. Sara Levine is the author of the novels The Hitch and Treasure Island. There's 3 exclamation points in that title, so I have to say it like that. As well as the story collection Short Dark Oracles. She teaches writing at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and on Substack at Delusions of Grammar. And as I mentioned earlier, Molly McGhee joins Sara in conversation tonight. Molly is a novelist from Nashville, Tennessee, living here in Brooklyn. She is the undergraduate creative writing advisor in fiction at Columbia University and author of the novel Jonathan Abernathy, You Are Kind. That's all for me. Please join me in giving Sara and Molly a very warm welcome.
Wow, I'm so excited to be here with Sara and all of you. I just want to acknowledge that we're missing Roxanne Gay tonight. She unfortunately had a small injury and could not make it. She's in our thoughts, and we will be talking to Sara a bit about what the editorial process was like with Roxanne, so we'll get the energy covered. Until then, Sara, will you please open us up with a reading from this magnificent book?
I would be delighted. I'm going to start us at the beginning so I don't have to orient you. So, Chapter 1. They dropped him off on a cold Saturday morning in February. He was 6 years old. I never wanted children, not for one atom-splitting second, but my nephew I adored, especially since he'd gotten out of diapers. They lived 2 miles away, but mostly I saw him on Saturdays, partly because his mother threw him into a river of activities: soccer, taekwondo, swimming. After which, she dredged up his body and dragged him to paintball fields, batting cages, trampoline parks. She can't sit still in a room with him, I told Victor. I didn't like it. I didn't like how they were raising him. Every Saturday, I hosted him from 10 to 12, and gladly would have kept him longer, lunch, dinner, overnight. But they whisked him back again as if he were on a timer. They were controlling, I said. She was controlling. But that Saturday, his parents didn't do the usual drop-off. They were headed to Mexico, and Nathan would stay with me for 7 nights. 8 days, a whole week with Nathan, just me and that golden boy. But the drop-off, it took forever. First off, Astrid wouldn't come all the way in, just stood there looking at Walter like she expected him to knock her over and plant his forepaws on her chest. Walter is a Newfoundland, and Newfs, as you probably know, are nicknamed the nanny dog. They're famously sweet. But Astrid isn't a dog person, or a cat person, or a people person. Holy cannoli, she and Victor said when I got Walter. If I wanted a dog, I might have begun with a smaller breed, one that wouldn't need so much exercise or grooming, a chihuahua, or a bulldog, possibly a pug. Cute now, but he'll grow big as a fucking pony, Victor said. Please don't think we're going to help out. We already have a child. By which Astrid meant, we already have a vampire draining my maternal heart. Change your mind and you can take him to the shelter. Walter is gorgeous, except for a minor incongruity in his forelegs, a perfect specimen. The minute he pressed his large domed head against my thigh, I loved him to the point of lunacy. Even when he peed on the rug and slung tangles of fur and drool on the wall, I didn't think, my sister-in-law's right, dogs are a lot of work. I should take him to the shelter. No, I thought, this dog is magic. He's steady and loyal and blunt-nosed and black like a bear, with fur so deep I can lose my fingers in it. Unlike his parents, Nathan understood us from the start. He could pull Walter's tail, snatch a toy, eat a dripping ice cream cone at mandibular height. Walter never growled. They were like brothers. That first summer, we followed the two of them out into the yard, and I shout, they're like twinned lambs that did frisk in the sun and bleat the one at the other. Shakespeare, Victor said to his blank-faced wife. She isn't much of a reader. I think that dog could use more training. We all could use more training. I clicked my tongue. Lie down, Walter. Lie down, see? Astrid rolled her eyes. You shouldn't have to say it 6 times. I said it 3 times. Who's counting? Victor said diplomatically. She is, I thought.
Sarah, this novel is so funny. The entire way through, you keep the tonal register. What was that like writing? Sorry, hold on. Was it funny for you?
That's a great question. I would never want anyone to think that I'm just sitting at the computer laughing the whole way. There's actually surprisingly a lot of angst that goes into it. A lot of what I think of as discipline and rigor. But there was a certain joy to this book, to finding the humor in it, and also a lot of cutting, a lot of judicious cutting. And that means that sometimes you leave what you think perhaps erroneously are really good jokes, you just leave them on the cutting room floor because you're trying to make sure that the story clips along.
I love that. When we were chatting backstage, I mentioned that I thought this novel was secretly a grief novel wrapped in an insane possession story. Did you know that going in, that it would be dealing with grief? And was that one of the reasons cutting was so important to you?
That's a great question. I love that description of it. I don't know if I knew it was about grief. I think I started with this voice of Rose Cutler, who was an aunt and wanted more time with her nephew. And I knew that there was something there. There was a trouble there. But I had to write it to sort of figure out why she was the way she was. And that meant discovering the grief and the backstory, which I really didn't want to tell. I didn't want to do a flashback suddenly where you find out what happened to her. So part of the challenge was to keep it moving at a clip and let the reader figure out what Rose was mourning, or what she had never finished mourning, or maybe even started.
Ooh, I love that. So what I'm hearing is that the pacing was extremely important to you. And I can really feel that the whole way through. I'm curious if you knew everything that was going to happen when you started, or if you had to work through multiple drafts. Are you open to writing or talking about your writing process?
Yeah, sure. I'm open to being a complete bore about my writing process. I wrote, I think, for many drafts. I don't count them, so I don't know how many there were. But I can pinpoint certain moments when there was an important story turn. So just to give you an idea of how awful it was when I began, it started with the corgi just being a ghost. And it was sort of like this little corgi was hunkering in the shadows of Rose's living room, and she was talking to it. And so it was kind of like Macbeth, like when he sees Banquo's ghost, out. But it didn't have anywhere to go. It ended up sounding more like Harvey, that play about the 6-foot rabbit. And so when I realized I could put the ghost inside the little boy, suddenly the material became alive to me because I had a triangulation. I had this woman who loved this little boy and then wanted to get the ghost out, and the little boy, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Rose is looking after her nephew when he is taken possession of by this corgi, and she thinks it's terrible. She basically thinks that she's in The Exorcist or Cujo, and her nephew, who's an only lonely child and has always wanted a pet, thinks he's in a Pixar movie. So a lot of the tension of the book is their struggle over the corgi. And so it just took a while to figure that out, that the corgi needed to be an inside dog.
The corgi's name is Hazel, and she is such a pivotal character in the novel. So is Walter, the Newfoundland. I love that the dogs are characters, and I was wondering if that was something that you also knew going in. I'm a dog person. So, guys, I read this novel and I was like, this was written for me.
So the question was, did I know the dogs would be characters?
So, yeah, you knew the ghosts would happen, but did you know that they would have such full characterization?
Oh, well, thank you. No, I didn't think I knew, but I knew what Walter had to be because Rose has sort of chosen Walter as her companion for life. She's chosen not to be married or in any kind of coupleship, and so Walter had to be this big kind of sexy working dog from her point of view, a useful dog. She has a real contempt for the smaller breeds, the non-working breeds. It's totally crazy. She's also really into purebreds at the beginning, but the arc of the book is about mingling in more than one way. And so I knew that Walter had to be formidable, at least as she described him. But part of the fun, too, was realizing that other people wouldn't experience Walter that way. So he's sort of like the boyfriend that nobody really likes, and you discover that gradually.
I love that. I feel like the action that is taking place is so embodied, and that's one of the reasons the characters really stand out, and the pacing moves so quickly. How did you manage that when you were on the cutting floor? How did you know what clip you wanted to go at?
Oh, it's so hard to know. It's like when I'm looking at it, it's interesting that you said embodied, because often I can feel it in my body, and that's something I came to very late, to realizing that you can actually use your body to write. And actually, I want to tell you where I learned that was from. There's some Peanuts anthology that's devoted to the best comic strips on writing, and I can't remember the name of the writer, but she talked about tuning into your body when you write. So that helps. I think also because it's a comedy, what you can do is ask yourself, if you're writing comedy, is if you find yourself thinking, is this funny? It's not. And that clarifies things, and that's how a lot of people get on the cutting room floor.
I love that. I'm curious if when you finish the novel and sort of talking to your agent and Roxanne, if you knew then how you wanted it to be received. When I was reading it, I felt I could feel it so completely. I felt like when I finished it, it just completely flew by and it felt so masterful. I doubt that's how you felt, but is it? Like, were you like,
masterful?
Yeah,
No.
did you think, I'm a genius?
No. I never even get close to that thought. What I thought was, I thought about what I wanted the experience I wanted the reader to have. And I thought about how I wanted it to be funny. And I wanted people to be thinking, well, this is a fun ride. This is like, ha, 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 ha. And then I kind of wanted to, and this might sound kind of mean, I'm sorry, but I wanted to sort of snatch that laugh out of your throat. I wanted the book to feel like it opens up into something sadder. Because I think tragedy and comedy always live right alongside each other.
Yeah, they're in conversation, which is very Shakespearean.
Oh, great.
You have several Shakespeare references throughout. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, the corgi has access to infinite intelligence, so that means that she has access.
I was hoping you would bring this up.
to everything. Shakespeare. Well, in the part that I read, you see that Rose, the narrator, she uses Shakespeare. She loves Shakespeare, but she also uses it as cultural capital. She uses it, as many people do, as a way to seem superior or to exclude other people. And so the corgi quotes Shakespeare at her as a way, I think, of letting Rose know that she's there, and also as a way, she's a shapeshifter, trickster figure, and she's a tease. So I thought of her as using Shakespeare to get Rose's attention, because that's a language Rose loves, but also she's fucking with her a little bit. Because when Rose hears a snatch of Macbeth, she thinks suddenly, the ghost is coming to get her. And it was also a way to, to just make the novel's language richer, because she didn't just have to talk like a 6-year-old boy.
I love that you brought up the language. The sonic resonance, sorry to be pretentious.
Let's be pretentious.
The way the novel sounds, you can really feel the music of the sentences, but it's so subtle because it's so funny that you're not thinking too hard about it. And I was wondering if you would speak a little bit about, this is a big question, and you can take it wherever you want, about your relationship with language and how you chose to apply it with Rose, who is such an intellectual figure. She's so in her head. She can't seem to get in her body. And she uses language to sort of subvert feeling those deeper feelings. I would love for you to speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a, nobody's asked me that. That's really fun. Yeah. Nobody's asked me about the sonic.
It was my favorite. I read Treasure Island, ! And I felt the same way about that book. You can just really feel the musicality, and it feels so satisfying to read, almost like you're listening to a concert while you're reading. I would love for you to speak about that, just as a fan.
So we need people to signal, like, if it's getting too nerdy, too
Sorry, I'm a
into
nerd.
No, I love thinking about the sentence. The sentence as an architecture, but also as the sentence as a sonic field. And so sometimes it's like, in terms of comedy, there are just certain words that are funny and certain words that are not funny. So, like, Astrid, Rose's sister-in-law, has a bunionectomy. I mean, you might not agree with me on this, but to me, the word bunionectomy is really funny. And then if you say it's a botched bunionectomy, and you're being serious, you're not even aware of those B's.
Straight face.
Straight face, yeah. So I do think a lot about the sound, but I think about the sound all the time with every sentence, and really do fuss it. And I think about, how it's going to sound if it were read aloud, but also how it sounds in the hall of the head. And I've always been interested in how, is phonics the word? A consonant or a vowel, how that affects pacing. So that when you want to slow something down, you need a certain kind of vowel sound to open it up. And if you want to create something tighter, you're going to go into a certain sound. So I love writing for the ear. But nobody's ever asked me about it, so thanks.
I can really feel it, and I think this is one of the reasons the book reads so quickly, is that every word just fits very neatly with the next word. But that's enough nerd stuff, okay? I'll stop. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your work with Roxanne, who can't be here tonight, and we miss her. I'm wondering what that was like for you, and what the editing process looked like, and if you were willing to share for Roxanne fans in the room.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was thrilling to be asked to send the book to Roxanne. Roxanne had read, actually, she and I haven't talked about this, but my first book, Short Dark Oracles, which came out with this tiny little press, she reviewed it in a magazine that was called HTML Giant. I don't know if anyone remembers that magazine. So, and I didn't know her. She reviewed it, and then she wrote a piece called Not Here to Make Friends. You guys know maybe from Bad Feminist, and she talked about Treasure Island and that unlikable female narrator. So I felt when she asked to see this new thing, that I couldn't have had a better audience, because she knew everything I'd done.
It was the perfect fit.
It really was. It was an incredible piece of luck. And when I sent it to her, she's very, as you would expect, like all business, she has a million different projects going on. And she sent it back with a lovely letter, and she said, "This is really pretty tight. This is a light edit." She said,
"Wow, how did that feel?"
That's what I'm telling you. Can I say it again? She said it was a light edit. And she said she likes to edit, but that there wasn't that much to do. So she queried a couple word choices. She did a wonderful thing. At one point she said, this is really funny dialogue, but why are we here? And I thought, and it was so like kind, and I thought it was so much better than somebody saying, this doesn't belong here, or I don't understand that. And I thought about it, and I actually ended up throwing away a whole subplot and redoing it, which I like it much better the way it is now. So I felt like she was the perfect editor for me. But I also want to tell you, and this is the good part about her not being here, is I probably wouldn't say this if she were here. You're not watching this, are you, Roxanne? She didn't, like when you turn in, if you remember turning in a paper to a teacher and you kind of want like checks or stars, she didn't write anything positive on the edit until she got to one line. There were no like ha-has or no sense of where the comedy was working. And then just one line in all caps, she wrote, "How I laughed." And it was a line that I hadn't even like particularly prized. And so that was so gratifying just to know where I got her.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
But I'm never going to tell you what line it was.
That's just for you and Roxanne. Speaking of subplots, I wanted to talk a little bit about the yogurt company. Please tell us a little bit about the yogurt company. And our main character goes vegan and decides to sell her yogurt company. How did you come to this? This is an insane, wonderful thing that is happening just beneath the book, and it really captures the logic of her.
Well, I wanted her to be having a midlife crisis before the corgi even arrived. So I thought, all right, she's an artisanal yogurt maker, and she's read the China study and learned that dairy is bad for your health. So this would put her into crisis, and then the question would be, does she have the courage to start her life over when all her connections are in the dairy world? But also, I have to say, and this is where the novel to me is and always will be a failure, what I wanted to do,
Hold on a second.
What I wanted to do, and my husband can attest to this, that when I finished it, I actually cried because I didn't do what I wanted to do, which was I wanted to write the first American novel about the microbiome. And I was really interested in yogurt because of what was going on at bacterial level. And I wanted, like, even Treasure Island, which is about adventure fiction and the Western adventure fiction and how it's a flight from women and it focuses too much on independence as opposed to interdependence. I see this novel as being, or trying to be, about interconnectedness. And so yogurt was the perfect thing because of,
That's right. Yeah.
So that's how come we're in yogurt. It seemed thematically on. But the microbiome stuff had to really drop out.
Maybe that's your next novel.
Maybe. Don't encourage me.
Okay. Okay, speaking of interpersonal, I loved the relationships that these characters had, particularly Rose and her brother. Would you be open to speaking a little bit about that? And especially with Nathan and how that triangulation works between them?
Yeah, sure. So Rose is the older sister, and she has a younger brother named Victor. And their parents died when they were young. And Rose is actually a first year in college at Vassar, and her brother is still in high school in Chicago. So she moves back home. She leaves college in the East, which is where I think she wanted to be. Maybe she wanted to be in New York eventually. But she kind of gets stuck in Chicago, and she raises Victor, and she helps him finish high school, get into college. She puts him through podiatry school. Why podiatry?
Podiatry.
Yeah. And she helps him buy a house even when he marries. She thinks rather hastily. So she's done all these things for him that, on the surface are good, but she's also one of those people who always lets you know when she's done something to help you. She's keeping score. And I think of her as being sort of like a mother substitute to him and having really bad boundaries. The book is really about boundaries in many ways.
And projection?
Yeah, and projection. Yeah. So she means well. She adores her brother, but she can't really see him clearly, or her nephew. She can't see her nephew clearly. And when she has a chance to have Nathan in her home, there's sort of an insinuation, kind of late in the book, which is what I think you're referring to, that maybe she's trying to get her brother back by having her nephew back. She's trying to recreate the past.
Which is when the Astrid character, no spoilers, okay? I'm not spoiling anything. But when Astrid, in my experience of Astrid as a character, changes at the end, in the beginning, I loved it when Astrid was around because I was like, who is this woman? And what are her goals? She was so, her dialogue was so, it always gave me a little bit of an itch, which I really liked. How did you write her dialogue to be just frustrating in the right way?
Well, I originally wrote this book from 7 different points of view.
Oh
And
my
so I
gosh.
wrote Astrid, and so I felt like I knew Astrid because I'd done her point of view. And then what I was doing was pulling back and writing it only as her sister-in-law saw her. So I think that helped me. That was sort of like the homework for Astrid.
Okay, I love that. I'm curious if there's anything that you want to share with readers or mention before folks go into the book.
Oh.
Big question, sorry.
No, that's a nice invitation. I mean, I guess because I'm seeing on social media the book described so often as insane, bonkers, or batshit. And I'm not saying that it's not those things, and I'm happy to have it be described in any way at all, frankly. But I do think of it myself as a love story.
Oh, I love that.
I think of it as a not a conventional love story, but a story that's about the impasses to love. Because Rose really wants to love her family.
Yeah.
But she literally doesn't know how. And the story is sort of like her journey from thinking she loves her family to realizing that she's got love and worry all tangled up like sheets in a dryer.
Her anxiety is a really big drive for the novel, which I think we can all relate to, especially right now with what's going on in the world. Was it difficult for you to write her anxiety? How did you keep from going too deep into it? There's never a moment, sometimes with novels, I don't know about you guys, sometimes when they touch the darkness, it's hard to come back from the darkness, right? But with this one, we touch the anxiety without it becoming too infectious, which is really interesting because it really has infected Rose. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, that's interesting because I think of anxiety as contagious.
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, like I can be anxious and I can feel myself making somebody else anxious if I speak too much about my anxiety. So there is a concern, I guess, that why would somebody want to read a book if it was going to make them very, very anxious? That said, I love the Austrian novelist Thomas Bernhard.
Wow, great name drop, me too.
Okay, and those books give you no space.
They are claustrophobic to a T.
Yeah, and I remember the very first time I read a Thomas Bernhard novel, I actually got a headache. I literally, talk about being embodied, I literally got a headache, but I loved it. I was willing to be in that intensity. And so I was thinking with Rose, how can I let her unspool and rant without totally alienating the reader? And I think one thing that I was thinking about was that she always rants for a reason, but she's ranting not for the reason that she thinks she's ranting. So if she's telling you about the retractable leash and how you shouldn't have one for your dog, she's really trying to avoid feeling guilty for having caused an accident. Or she's talking about pancakes and pancake houses and Aunt Jemima, she's really trying to avoid saying, I feel lonely and abandoned. So I was hoping that the reader would enjoy that game of reading the surface rant and the anxiety, but doing the detective work to understand what's going on underneath. Because Rose is somebody who really doesn't understand the tumult inside of her.
Though all of her loved ones have a really great understanding of who she is as a character. And so especially I loved the character Omar, because every time she would sort of do this, move into this space, he was like, Rose, come on. I really love that you added that character, especially because we don't see a lot of friends characters for childless women in fiction, and I felt like you did a great job depicting that. I just got the signal that it's time to open it up to you guys. Do you have any questions for Sarah? Yeah.
First of all, I think this is a work of genius, no matter what you think, Sarah. Sorry, I just do. My question, and it's a real question, is do you think Rose is narrating this work for any person or persons in particular, or does she have no idea who she's communicating with? For instance, what function do all these recipes have for her, do you think? If those are part of the same question, I don't know.
I'm going to repeat that question for our audience at home. The question was, does Rose have an audience she's narrating to? And what is the purpose of the inclusion of these recipes, which suggests that she may be doing this?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, an astute question.
Thank you.
Because some novels that you do find that there's an implied listener. Thinking of the Eudora Welty Ponderheart, where there's a guest in the hotel that the narrator's speaking to. I didn't imagine a specific interlocutor or receiver, more like a generalized view, but it's like maybe even imaginary, like it's sort of a defense of her actions. But the recipes were an attempt to soften her in some ways. I think she's somebody, as I said, who has boundary issues. So she's the kind of person who sends you a PubMed article that you didn't ask to see, or gives you a recipe even though you didn't compliment her cooking. So it seemed like right that she was already talking recipes before I decided to add them in more explicitly. But I think I was aware of that reader, and this might relate to what Molly was saying about anxiety. And I was thinking, like, can I have her give something to the reader? Would it make her more generous seeming if she's offering a recipe? So that was the strategy of it. But I don't imagine her like in a specific place, like a mental hospital, telling the doctor this is what happened. I think it's more that conventional implied reader.
Yeah.
So psychology seems to play an interesting role throughout the book with her parents and her kind of dislike of diagnoses with ADHD. How did you think to kind of weave that through with Rose being so exposed to therapy kind of in the round, but refusing to acknowledge any inner work on herself?
The question was, how did you choose to weave psychological themes throughout the work, even when Rose was so adverse to diagnostics or working on herself in those terms?
Yeah. Well, it was really important to me that Rose not know herself. That was, the premise of the book in some ways, that this character would have psychological blind spots. I mean, I think we all have them, but she's a little bit extreme. And so then what I have to do as a writer is cue the reader that I know that those blind spots are there. Otherwise, you'll just think I'm adult, right? You'll just think, oh, bad writer. So having her be the child of a psychiatrist allowed her to rant about psychiatry and reflect about the coldness maybe of her home, and also maybe signal to the reader, excuse me, like when she's so upset about that psychiatrist that she was made to see, what her mother is dying, what the problem wasn't that the woman had a long braid and was wearing a long skirt like she was walking the Oregon Trail. You understand that she would do anything, criticize anybody, blame anybody to avoid feeling this grief that she's feeling. So I felt like I needed there to be other characters who around her who were interested in psychology, which is where Omar's a big Oprah fan. And then we have, the father who's a psychiatrist, and Tommy, her nephew's friend's mother, also believes in the ADHD diagnosis. So you just sort of have to find a way to sort of punch holes in what Rose is offering, and it seemed really important to do that so that you would understand that I know that Rose is missing quite a lot of her life.
Yeah.
I have a question about the sound, back to the sound, and because even when you were reading, it was like you had different voices for when the different characters were speaking, and in your editing process, do you read the full book aloud to yourself, and did you catch anything as you were doing that stood out to you?
Yeah.
The question was, when Sara was editing, when Sara was editing, did she read aloud to herself, and did she catch anything while she was doing this?
Yeah, I do read aloud as I write. I always tell my students you should read out loud when you write, and then I don't do it. I'll let a lot of time go by because I'm lazy. But then there's a certain point where I absolutely have to read it out loud, and I always hear things. That I didn't catch when I was just reading it. And the final, I revised this book so many times, but the final revision, I read the whole thing out loud. and it was really fun, actually. But I was still catching things at that very late stage. It's humbling.
Yes, yeah, in the back.
Hey, yeah. You said that you shed tears after you finished the book.
Speak more about crying.
And like, what was that experience? Like, how do you characterize those tears?
When you finished the novel, it sounds like you had a really big emotional experience. Would you be open to speaking a little bit more about that?
Oh, that's so funny. I don't know. I didn't say that tonight, did I?
Yes.
No, you said you were crying about the.
That it wasn't.
You were crying about the
I was
microbiome.
crying-
Yeah, the
I was crying
microbiome,
about the
yeah.
microbiome. Oh yeah, no, I thought you meant like like Flaubert when he was writing Madame Bovary, was just weeping as he wrote. No, I was crying because I thought the book was a failure. I finished it and I came out and I told my husband, I didn't do it. There's no microbiome. But that said, I actually, the reason I was so freaked out by that question was because I didn't think I'd said that, but I actually, after years of mocking Flaubert for crying while he wrote and thinking, what an artiste, I actually was moved. I actually was moved when I wrote the final lines of the book, and I was stunned because I'm not often in my body, it was often up here, and sorry. Does that mean we're not
It's a fallen soldier.
Yeah, I think we need to put that on for the recording. I was shocked. I didn't know how the book was going to end, and so I did cry. So you were right. You were smart to ask that question. I was caught in my Flaubert moment.
Did I see a hand up here? Yeah.
I just wondered what you were reading, like before you were writing, while you were editing, if that was part of your process at all, and what the books were.
Thank you for asking that question because I meant to ask that question. Were you reading anything while you were writing this or while you were editing? Can you share any recommendations?
Yeah, well, because this is the first time I have written a book about a possession. I read The Exorcist. I read that wonderful book by Sara called Come Closer.
I love that book. That's a
It's
great
good
book.
book. I read John Wyndham's Chalky, was really important. I read Hilary Mantel, or just reread Hilary Mantel, because she's one of my favorites. And I'm trying to think who else was important. P.G. Woodhouse.
For those at home, there's a really satisfying that just rippled through the audience. Are there any final questions? Amazing. Sara, thank you so much.
Thank
Can
you
we
all
all
for coming out.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. Thank you to Molly for stepping in at the very last minute to moderate this event. Thank you to Roxanne, who is in our hearts, and for editing such an incredible book. And thank you, Sara, for celebrating this launch with us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, our pleasure. So, some final reminders before we all wrap up and head home. If you're still with us on the live stream, you can buy a copy by clicking the link in the live stream description. Those of you with us tonight, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, we've got some additional copies available at the register where you checked in. I believe we also have 2 or 3 copies of Treasure Island! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. So check that out as well if you haven't yet. We also have some copies of Molly's novel, Jonathan Abernathy, You Are Kind, also fantastic, also both weird and moving, and a great companion read in some ways. Sara will be around to sign and personalize your books. That's going to be happening in the back where my coworkers are now pointing to. Yes. So we're going to ask that you all line up down the center aisle. Please make sure to grab all of your personal belongings with you so that our staff can start to break down and rearrange the store. But because there are so many of you, we're going to ask that you sit tight until we get Sara set up back there, and then go ahead and approach. And that's all. Thank you all again. Let's give these two one more round of applause. And have a great rest of your night.